I think the Chiefs offense has a chance to be better this year than it was last year. Welcome in. It is the Breer Report for July the 17th. I know I promised a mailbag edition, but we had so much news this week, we figured we would hit the news instead. So we have 3 news items to cover here, and we are going to start with what happened with the New York Jets earlier this week. Garrett Wilson signs a 4-year, $130 million extension. Sauce Gardner signs a 4-year, $120.4 million extension. Those guys now are both locked up through 2030, so through the prime of their careers. And I think the big picture way to look at this, because this is something that they've been working on for a while. I was pretty confident they'd get both of these guys done before the start of the season, way back in the spring, is how Aaron Glenn and Darren Mugier are going about building their team. And I think it's informative to look back at Aaron Glenn's experience in Detroit under Dan Campbell. Now, that, of course, was a complete rebuild. And they had to rebuild a lot of different things about the team, about the culture, about the roster. But they did go in with an open mind towards keeping guys who had already been in place under Matt Patricia as pillars of what they were going to build going forward. And I'll never forget when they made the playoffs for the first time in forever in 2023. I remember Dan Campbell calling up the guys he referred to as the OGs, the guys that he inherited, the guys that he thought were so important. And so guys like Taylor Decker and Frank Ragnow were so important to building what they built in Detroit. And I think that that's what Aaron Glenn was looking for in the spring in New York. We have a lot of young talent. There's way more young talent with the Jets right now than the Dan Campbell group found in Detroit when they got there in 2021. So which of these guys can be pieces for us going forward? And so you were looking at Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner on the defensive side of the ball. On top of Sauce, you have Quinnen Williams, you have Quincy Williams, you have Jermaine Johnson. On the offensive side, in addition to Garrett Wilson, you inherited Ollie Vera Tucker, Olufashanu, Breece Hall. There are all of these guys that were left behind by Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh that were really good players, that had a chance to be core players. And so what you do if you're Darren Mugier and Aaron Glenn is you say, okay, prove it now. Let's see what you can be. Let's see how you operate in our program. And, because of the way the offseason program is set up in the NFL, these new coaches, these new general managers have 9 weeks to do it before training camp starts. So for Garrett Wilson, who things got a little rocky between him and Aaron Rodgers at times over the last couple of years, and for Sauce Gardner, who had not a great third year in the NFL last year, there was a chance to work from a clean slate and prove yourself again. Clearly, those guys had really strong springs. Clearly, the Jets are doubling down on them. And clearly, the new Jets regime came in with an open mind towards taking pieces of the old Jets regime and making it part of the foundation going forward. So these are the first 2. I don't anticipate they'll be the last 2 guys that Glenn and Mugier inherited that they'll reward. But clearly those guys were very good players. Those would be hits, in a year when they had 3 first-round picks, the Jets did, when it was Gardner and Wilson, and of course Jermaine Johnson, who's going to have to prove himself coming back off of injury. You had real talent on the roster. The question was, could the talent fit what they were trying to build? And clearly Glenn and Mugier think so. All right, topic number 2, the Washington Commanders have a lot going on right now. Von Miller's coming in. Terry McLaurin's situation is still in flux. And the Terry McLaurin situation, teams have called and teams will continue to check in. That's standard operating procedure in the NFL. Teams will check in when a player like this has a contract situation like this. I just don't anticipate that the Commanders would move off of Terry McLaurin. I just look at everything that, and this is just me talking, I look at everything that Dan Quinn was trying to establish over his first year and how Terry McLaurin was perfect for it. I mean, this is a guy who was, when he was at Ohio State, one of the best special teams players that they had before he became a great receiver, and a guy who became a captain as a rookie. And that's really hard to do if you're not a quarterback, but became a captain as a rookie under Ron Rivera. This guy represents everything that Dan Quinn and Adam Peters have been trying to build over the last 18 months. The problem is there hasn't been a lot of dialogue over the last month. I would think in the coming days, the talk is going to pick up. I know Terry McLaurin's frustrated, rightfully so. He's poured a ton into that franchise. He's endured a lot, and he did a lot for the team last year. So he has every right to be frustrated that these talks really haven't gone anywhere. There haven't been talks at all, really, over the last month. But there is still time to get something done. And I just think in the end, with McLaurin and the Commanders, it's just too good a fit for either side to walk away from. I understand why the Commanders would be a little hesitant given Terry McLaurin's age. People don't realize he's a little older because he was a 5-year college guy, so he's in his 30s now. I can understand where you want to be a little careful about how you pay a guy who is now in his 30s. I understand where Terry McLaurin would be really upset with the way the team has handled this, that they wouldn't move more aggressively towards getting something done. But I do think the Garrett Wilson deal can clarify some things as far as where the team is, where the player is. It's another receiver now who's making in the 30s from an APY perspective. It's different because he's younger, but it does clarify the market a little bit more on where you have to pay these guys. And I just look at the Commanders' moves, over the course of the last 6 months and what they've done, really the last 9 months, going back to Marshawn Lattimore before the trade deadline and bringing in Marshawn Lattimore and Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil and really trying to take advantage of the window that you're in with Jaden Daniels on a rookie contract. I think they're going to find a way to get something done. It's got to be in the 30s. Again, I understand you have to be careful if you're the team, but they've already leaned in on some older players. So it's not like this would be the first time they're doing it. And for McLaurin, I just view it from his perspective. He really likes it there. He's poured too much into the franchise. I know he really takes a lot of pride in being a one-team guy. I think there's too much mutual interest not to get something done. Now, that brings us to the Von Miller move, which I think needs to be digested in the right context. I think what Adam Peters and Dan Quinn have done in building up the premium positions on that roster is phenomenal. You draft Jaden Daniels to be your quarterback. Maybe that fell in your lap a little bit, but you do get that one right. You have Terry McLaurin at receiver. You add Deebo Samuel there. You trade for Marshawn Lattimore at corner. You add Mikey Sandersill in the draft. At tackle, you drafted Brandon Coleman last year. Now he's functional at left tackle. You move him inside. You trade for Laramie Tunsil to replace him. You draft Josh Connerly to be the tackle on the right side. You've taken care of really, I'd say almost all of the premium positions now, where you're not only functional, you're pretty good at all the premium positions, except for edge rusher. And so to me, the signing of Von Miller is addressing the edge rusher issue, but it doesn't fix it completely, because I think what the Bills found over the last couple of years with Von Miller at his age, to really get the most out of him, you've got to use him less. And that's what Buffalo did the last couple of years. They scaled down what they were asking of him so they could get the most out of him when he was on the field. So at best, if this is working at its highest level, you've got a rotation of defensive ends, and Von Miller's coming in there on third down, and he's still got the juice because he's only playing 30 or 40% of the snaps. You have him really as a specialist. If he's in that role, I love the idea of it because I do think that he can still bring something to the table, but he can't be a 70 or 80% of the snaps guy. I think that they got to, again, kind of lean into what they already have at the position, which isn't phenomenal, but they do have good vets like Dorrance Armstrong at the position, and use Von Miller judiciously. Finally, topic number 3, the final unsigned franchise tag player got done this week. Trey Smith did a 4-year, $94 million deal. The obvious first piece of this in that contract getting done is that it does move the guard market. He becomes the highest paid guard at $23.5 million per year. That's good for all the guards across the NFL. It's rare that a guard or center is tagged because the offensive line tag is a catch-all. The offensive line tag is based on what the top tackles make. So generally guards and centers don't wind up getting tagged. He did get tagged. So the fact that he did get tagged gave gave Trey Smith's side some leverage. They were able to use it. They were able to move the guard market forward. That's good for all the great guards across the NFL. So that's number 1. Number 2, it does highlight where the Chiefs are on the offensive line. I think the Chiefs offense has a chance to be better this year than it was last year. I think based on where they are at the skill positions, I think that's very clear. Rashee Rice, they believe he can be a top 10 receiver in the NFL this year as their slot guy. They think he was trending that way last year before he got hurt. Hollywood Brown, they didn't get the full version of him last year because of injury. Rice and Brown never played together because Rice got hurt within the first month of the season. Brown, of course, was out for the first 3 months or so of the season. He came back in December. So now this vision they have for Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy on the outside. By the way, Worthy should be a little bit better because now he has his rookie year under his belt. Those guys running downfield, clearing out space for Travis Kelce and Rashee Rice underneath. I love the idea of it. They've got some depth at tight end with guys like Noah Gray and this rookie, Jake Briningstool. Keep an eye on him. Isaiah Pacheco comes back healthy. He's playing for a contract. Love what they have at the skill spots. So to me, what this comes down to for the Chiefs is that offensive line. Trey Smith was such a big part of it. This worked the way that you would draw it up with Joe Thuney and Trey Smith, is that you drafted Trey Smith, you signed Joe Thuney. Eventually, Trey Smith wound up becoming the replacement from a contractual standpoint for Joe Thuney. So you trade Joe Thuney so you can pay Trey Smith. You hope now that Kingsley Suamataia, moving in from tackle to guard, will be the Trey Smith in this equation, with Trey Smith now becoming the Joe Thuney. You're really solid on the inside, I think, is the result of this, as long as Kingsley works out there with Creed Humphrey, maybe the best center in football, anchoring that group on the interior. What happens at tackle? To me, that's a swing factor. Now you got the inside of your line taken care of. What happens at the tackle position? Is it Josh Simmons at left tackle? Is it Jalen Moore at left tackle? Is Juwan Taylor still the right tackle? From those three players, you're going to have to get two. And I think there's a really good chance they're better at tackle than they were a year ago because they got so desperate last year. Whether it was Wanye Morris or Kingsley Suamataia or Joe Thuney moving out to left tackle, they really had to manage that position. Now they got a potential long-term answer in Josh Simmons, a very effective stopgap in Jalen Moore if he needs to be that. They paid him $15 million a year. He was a good fill-in for Trent Williams when needed. And then over at right tackle, you got Juwan Taylor, who, if Simmons wins the left tackle job, maybe you got more competing with Taylor for the right tackle spot. Either way, I think there's a good chance you come out with a better situation at tackle that you had a year ago. And again, added to what I already went over at the skill positions, I think the Chiefs have a chance to be better on offense than they were a year ago, and they were in the Super Bowl a year ago. Again, the Chiefs team has a chance to be better overall, with the X factor being the age of Kelce, the age of Chris Jones. You don't know where those things are going to go, but it's still a really good roster, a really good team. And you got the best quarterback in football at the controls in Patrick Mahomes. Appreciate you guys coming out. We will be hitting the road next week. Can't wait to get out there. My first stop is going to be Detroit. From there, I'm going to go through the Midwest. We will have Breer reports for you. We will have mailbags for you. We're going to have takeaways from every camp. I promised you over the course of the next 6 weeks, plan to cover all 32 in some form or fashion. It is almost the beginning of football season for us. Summer is almost over for me. Can't wait to catch up with you guys next week.